I was thinking earlier, what was the one word? And it seems to be, it's such a nothing little word, but it meant a huge amount to me. I just honestly think Sheridan was fun.
What I think is unique about Sheridan College is the incredible compassion that the instructors have for our students. You know, Sheridan says that they're student-centered, and amazingly, they actually are. We actually are student-centered in many, many ways.
Was world-renowned back then, and still is today.
What I would say differentiates it absolutely from any other post-secondary institution is the absolute commitment to creativity and innovation.
There was a sense that this is our mission.
There's absolutely a Sheridan culture. I've described it sort of as pixie dust. I've described it as some kind of magic, some kind of secret ingredient.
The sense of art and creativity is in its DNA.
It's in an environment of thoughtful dreamers, and that sense of confidence I've really never seen anywhere else.
It's hard to trace the history of it. People say, did you really know that the college system would be so great? And of course I said, of course I knew. And if you believe that, I can tell you something else, but.
My name is Bob McCruden. My student number is 670-000-283.
I'm Len McGay, and I guess I started back with Sheridan in 1967 when the colleges first were introduced.
We came to the conclusion we had to do something with what was happening within the system. And the concern we had for the number of students who are coming out where university is not the obvious place for them to go.
In my used-to-be history, I spent a year and a half in university, and that, in my way, didn't work. It was too stuffy, too theorized, or whatever the case might be.
The first time I ever realized that the colleges were going to be coming into existence was I read about an article in the newspaper. And this is when I found out that Sheridan was going to get established, along with a number of other colleges.
In 1966, when all the advertisements came out about the community colleges, so they talked about something that was more skills-related in the community colleges.
Well, there was some debate in Brampton. We started out with the use of the old Brampton High School, which was not the greatest place to start a college.
I started in Brampton, Ontario at the old Brampton High School, which became the first true buildings that were used by Sheridan College.
My first impressions of Sheridan were this large building, which used to be a high school in Brampton, and apparently had been condemned at one point, but I think Sheridan had actually gone in and done a number of renovations to make it suitable for the new students coming in.
So in 1966, I applied to Sheridan College, was accepted in business administration, and started, interestingly enough, on September the 18th, 1967, which was the day before my 20th birthday. I was a guy that blew the bugle at the hockey games and at the football games, like the guy does in the Forum in Montreal. And although I wasn't talented enough to make the hockey team, but I was there with the full force of all the fans cheering, because that's what you had to do.
We had a large cafeteria because it was, as I say, a high school prior. And we had a library there. We had student lounge facilities. We set up our first student student union. We're told to dress in business attire, that all of our professors were in business attire as well. And I thought this was a unique situation. And this actually lasted, I guess, about 2 years. And then they started to, I think it was more from the arts program, it gradually started to get away from the business attire. But life was great. It was such a close-knit group. Every Friday afternoon, we would take part of the afternoon off, and we would all head up to Norville there for the 15-cent drafts. Held our convocation even though we officially graduated from the Davis, or the old Brampton High School. Our convocation was down here outside on the main campus here at the Trafalgar campus.
I graduated in April of 1970, and I started working for the college on the 12th of May, 1970.
So I started here 2 weeks after I graduated, and I got married at the same time and took a quick honeymoon for 2 weeks, and then come back in and started my full-time placement.
And he said, oh, you know, I just quit at Sheridan College. They're starting a media arts department out there. And I said, well, I've got a degree in film. He said, well, why don't you go out there? And he immediately phoned up the dean and said, I got this guy who's got a degree in film. I'm going to send him out to you. So within an hour, I was out here in my job interview. And that is actually the first time I ever heard of Sheridan College. My name's Jim Cox. I started in 1971 in the Media Arts Department when it was part of English and Media Studies. There was A wing, B wing, and that was it.
It was rural. There were no houses around it. It was lovely and green. Okay, I am Joan Condy. Started here 38 years ago as faculty.
I will tell the very first class, I walked into class and I did what I tended to do throughout my career, which was find out what people were into. So I had them sitting around, let's introduce yourself and tell us why you're here. Get to this guy with long, stringy, blonde hair. And he says, well, man, when I was in high school, right, at noontime, like there was a culvert beside the high school, and like we'd go down in the culvert and we'd be sitting around doing mezcalito, man. And I'd look, and it was like a movie screen out the end of the culvert. He said, and I decided, I want to make movies. And that's why I'm here. And they're like, oh my God, what?
The college was light-filled, and it seemed like a very fancy, evolved high school. Lockers everywhere, interesting classrooms that didn't seem at all like university lecture halls.
And I really, really, really liked the students. The students were, I don't want to say not academic, but they were broader than academic. They were more interested in a lot of different things, and they were very, what I call bright. My name is Joan Vinyl Cox. I taught at Sheridan for 35 years. I started out, they had somebody as a teacher who dropped out after 2 weeks. And I had been going to parties, faculty parties with Jim, who was already a professor here, my husband. And so they knew I had taught for 4 years to adults English as a second language. So they got in touch with me. I was hired. I liked it a lot. I had a boss who was quite aware of my feminist leanings, and he had been coaching the media arts intramural hockey team, and I believe he wanted to get out of it. And we had some kind of a conversation where I got all feministy and ended up agreeing to coach the hockey team. My husband was kind enough to get me a booklet on how to run hockey practices, but he was a little upset when I kept referring to them as rehearsals.
I first attended Sheridan, I was 19. So that's going back a long time. Sillius, I was a student here from 1975 to 1977. And during that time, as I was taking the library techniques program, I met my husband. And then once I graduated, I moved on to several part-time jobs and then came back in 1989 and started here full-time and haven't left. My first impressions as a student was wow, because I had already seen Niagara College and this was much bigger than Niagara was. So I was very excited to be out on my own and moving away from home.
Back in the 70s, when we were in high school, the college system was relatively new, and if anything, it was extremely controversial for me to want to go to take a college program. And I had to have a lot of discussion and conversation with my father about post-secondary education and why I wanted to try this new way of going to post-secondary, which is in the college system. Hey, I'm Linda Dalton. I started as a student at Sheridan in the 70s. I graduated from the journalism program in 1980, and I started working here in 1982. I arrived at Sheridan, I was terrified. I walked in the hallways and it seemed so large. I had no idea how I was going to find my way around campus. I remember standing at the bank of phones, which are no longer outside of the cafeteria, and phoning my father and saying, what have I done? Why am I here? I should never have come to this place. And just as I was having that phone conversation, somebody in my class came by and said, hey Linda, come to the caf, we're all going to lunch. Hung up the phone and my father immediately, and all of a sudden I got embraced into the community of the classroom and the students and felt very comfortable after that.
I know I'm traveling on a part of the 407 that I saw being built in 1987, 88, or 89. I wondered, what's that? What are they building that for in the middle of nowhere? And then slowly but surely the highway moved around to there. And and then coming down Trafalgar Road was like nothing. It was fields, farmers' fields. The only place that did exist then was the Wren's feed, because they were providing for farmers, because that's all this was. And now it's built up like crazy. This would have been a good place to buy a piece of land back in 1989. It would have been a good idea, but yeah. I'm Jack Yarowitz. I came to Sheridan in 1984. The first course I taught was Poetry 1984, which, if you know the book, was kind of ironic.
My name is John Armstrong. I have been teaching at Sheridan College since 1982. I've taught in the Art and Art History program, which is a joint program between the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and Sheridan that began in 1971. And was the first joint program between a college and a university in Canada. In the early days, I knew everyone. I knew all the teachers, all the faculty members, and all of the coordinators, and all of the, what we called the associate dean's chairs in those days.
My first impressions when I started to work here were very different than those of a student. Part of what I had to do was to get beyond that impression that people who still remembered me as a student, that I was now a professional person. So it was important for me to get out there and to communicate and to meet new people. I have to tell you about my first day at work at Sheridan. When I came into to my first day, I was in the information services department, and one of the recruitment officers offered to take me for a campus tour, and I thought, this is great. I've never seen the campus from the lens of an employee. I'd really like to do this. And as she walked me around the campus and she showed me all the places that I would want to go as an employee now and not as a student, one of the places that she brought me was into the arts wing. And it was very exciting for me because I was seeing behind the scenes where some of the classes happened within the arts program that I hadn't seen before. But she didn't warn me that we were going into a life drawing class. And as we walked into the class, and at the time, the life drawing studio was on the lower end and we were on a balcony. And as we stood over, as she explained to me what was happening in that class, the gentleman who walked in totally disrobed. And I was now in the midst of watching this as the students were. So as a 22-year-old young woman trying so hard to be professional, it was a little bit awkward on my first day.
In the early 80s, on the north side of the Trafalgar campus were farms, and the drawing studios were quite close to the border of the campus, the northern border of the campus. So what we would on occasion do, we would switch out the naked human form as our subject, and we would get in a cow or a horse. So we had a great relationship with the farmer, so we would go and borrow his animals and lead them, across the driveway into campus and straight into our drawing studios in A wing. So straight into the drawing studios behind us, behind where we're sitting now. And the instructors would arrange the animals. They were pretty cooperative. Sometimes there was the production of waste, which we had to deal with as well in class, but it was, the students really loved drawing these animals.
Well, my name is Mary Hofstetter, and I had the privilege of serving as the third president of Sheridan College from 1988 to 1996. It was pretty overwhelming, to be honest. The adage about being careful what you wish for because it might happen. There was a sense of unreality about the whole thing.
I would have never achieved the things I had done if I hadn't come here. I would have never, ever, ever gotten where I was going. And I don't think a lot of people looked at the community college system like that. My name's Chris Stagg, and while I was here, I took business administration, the 3-year course. And on top of that, besides the big push for academics, I was head of the student government for my final year. At that time, it wasn't a full-time job. It was on top of your regular course load. And that was just an unbelievable experience. Really didn't have a clue how close the student center was to becoming a reality.
I knew it was desperately needed, but in those days, the funding situation was pretty dire. And so it needed to be a team effort.
Thinking, boy, they've turned this down 17 times in a row.
He was a great leader and a good example of the way student leaders can really make a difference and just how important the role is that they can play, because that was a team effort. Because the students also agreed that they would have a levy to help contribute to the cost.
When I graduated, Mary Hofstetter was the president at the time. And I was trying to do something different when I got up there. That was who I was.
Did Christopher Stagg tell you what he did to me?
Oh, no. Okay, well.
Convocation day. Christopher crosses the stage. I hand him his diploma, and he picks me up and twirls me around and then plops me back down again.
But I remember teaching email and And Jim was ahead of me at that point in his knowledge, and I knew who was fairly good because I'd been on the committee. And what happened was, I'm teaching them how to, what to say and how it's not like a letter, but you do this and you do that. And one of my students said, "How do you do an attachment?" And I looked at her and I said, "That's next week." Then when the class was over, called all my friends and said, "How do you do an attachment? How do you do an attachment?" And I taught it the next week. It was a fabulous learning experience. So. I believe it was the mid-90s when Sheridan started to move onto the web. I was incredibly lucky. One of the profs that's still here, Mary Jane Carroll, and she went down to the States to an interior design conference in the early 90s, I think. Came back realizing that the web was going to be incredibly important. And she got her teachers, me among them, onto the web and teaching using the web, both for teaching and for organizing student material.
This led them to disband the English department, and they got rid of everybody who was less than 10 years, and all the other people were farmed out to specific other programs to be the English teacher of the English and/or Gen Ed teacher of that program. And I was like 9 years and 3/4. So I got a layoff notice.
Well, we had to make choices. We had to decide that we could do fewer things better or all things less well.
However, having been the college council chair and having been the union president, I knew a lot of the deans and had sat on many committees with them, and they knew how much I was into computers and other things. So I ended up teaching everywhere. I taught in every program, introduction to computers.
Well, when I first arrived at the college at Sheridan, it was probably at the lowest point of its history. Not only for Sheridan, but the universities and all the colleges were going through an economic difficult period of time. So I'd have to say when I came to Sheridan, I would say heads were low, and people were wondering all collectively about their future. I was the 4th president at Sheridan. Well, one of the great assets that I had as president was Sheridan's history. So when I look back now, and actually when I was there, you had to give credit to the communities, both the presidents and the community who came before you. It's one thing to come to a community and have to build it, but in a sense, I came to a community that had very, very healthy roots.
Well, I remember that they had an operation in Cooksville, not a big one, and then they moved out of Cooksville and located, of course, in Oakville. And I was disappointed at the time because I felt that you can't build a city without a great university and a great college. But anyway, the years went on. I supported Sheridan in Oakville, and then they located in Brampton, and a major contribution to their operation in Brampton. And then I worked with Dr. Turner, the president of the Sheridan, a wonderful gentleman. And he promised me that he would bring Sheridan back to Mississauga in a big way, and he did it.
I'm Rob Turner. I was president of Sheridan from April 2001 to December 15th, 2009, and so very proud to have played that role. Certainly, when I first came to Sheridan, I had done my homework on the institution and realized with absolute clarity what I was standing on, the vision of Jack Porter and the three presidents that followed him, Don Shields, Mary Hofstetter, Sheldon Levy, all were extraordinary presidents in their own right. Easy for me to say, but I'm sure that's known across the country. These are exceptional leaders. And though our visions might have been somewhat different, they all were at the core taking Sheridan to the top and believing to the core that it's our manifest destiny to be the best applied institution in this country. All of us share that same vision.
I had been after Sheridan to build a campus here, having worked with Dr. Turner, even though we didn't have an establishment here. And I also clearly indicated to the province that the next expansion of Sheridan should be in the city of Mississauga. And so I knew that the city had to make a contribution to have it happen, which we did. We made a major financial contribution to we donated the land here in the city core, because I knew that Sheridan would give life to the city core, which it has.
As to Mississauga, my promise to Mayor McKellion when I first met her was that we would be here and deliver a major campus here. I did that early days, but I qualified it by saying we had to attend to Brampton first, which was perhaps a gutsy move when you consider who I was talking to. Hazel accepted my promise, accepted me, accepted that we would be here someday, and she patiently, probably uncharacteristically patiently, waited for us to be there. I think my proudest moment might have been, ironically, on my last day, cutting the ribbon for the Mississauga campus, something that I had worked on throughout my tenure, something that seemed to be against all odds and nobody seemed to support initially. And so knowing that was in the works was a real source of pride for me, a real source of gratification. Perhaps a more fun event, or an equally fun day, was hosting the Queen on her Golden Jubilee, and Sheridan being chosen as the institution to host the Queen in Ontario for our celebrations as a province was an extraordinary day. It lifted our whole institution up off the ground, students and faculty, staff, administrators, board members. We just had a great day, and it'll remain in my memory forever.
And here we go.
Hi there, Sheridan College. I'm Jeff Sabudsky, your college president. And as you can see, I'm getting ready for Movember, and I'd like to propose a challenge. On the week of October 31st to November 4th, Sheridan students and staff will be able to decide the fate of my mustache. Hi, I'm Jeff Sabudsky, and I'm happy to say that I was the proud president of Sheridan College for almost 7 years, from 2010 to the end of 2016. I came into the role as we were about to dig a big hole in Mississauga to create our Mississauga campus. So I had the honor of watching that first phase grow, putting in place the funds for the second phase, and then seeing it spring forth and to now what it is today, a wonderful, true campus presence in the core of Mississauga. So in line with that, I was also very proud to install the first chancellor in the form of Hazel McCallion, who was just a really wonderful advocate, somebody I got to know really quite well, somebody who was beloved by me, someone who's beloved by everybody, and to see her take on that incredible leadership role as our first chancellor.
Sheridan always had some kind of pixie dust or magic that made it quite different and unique relative to the other colleges with which I was familiar.
Bangar.
The really emotional part of convocation is The expression of transformation that students and often their families express as a result of somebody's experience here.
Sonny Batal.
I have been at Sheridan College 9 years today, so I'm celebrating my own birthday or anniversary. First of all, I did not pursue a presidency. I loved what I was doing and what I have done as a provost and working with faculty around programming and student success and student opportunities. So I could actually speak sitting in this office in July of last year when Jeff Zabutsky informed me that he was leaving and suggested to me that the board would like me to stay on as president. So that was sort of a big gulp. Just knew there were things that I could do from the inside because of what I knew working here for the period I've worked here to prepare Sheridan for president number 8.
Congratulations. You are now Sheridan's newest graduates.
I've said often that I think Sheridan is a small town that has grown into a city, but has retained the elements and the magic of a small town.
Sheridan, a very, very happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Sheridan. Here's to the next 50.
Happy 50th birthday, Sheridan. I wish you all the very, very best. You're all wonderful people.
Sheridan, happy birthday.
Sheridan College, I wish you a happy birthday. I wish you wonderful, wonderful new adventures and continued transformation for your next 50 years.
Happy birthday, Sheridan, on the 50th.
Happy birthday, Sheridan. You deserve many more of the same.
Happy birthday, Sheridan. I'm so proud of having been a part of this place.
I'm Kathleen Wynne, Premier of Ontario. I'm delighted to join you in celebrating the 50th anniversary of Sheridan College.
Yes, it's a pleasure to wish Sheridan College happy birthday. My birthday of 88 years was not too long ago. I wish myself many happy returns. I didn't receive any returns, but nonetheless, I enjoyed turning 88, still being alive, and be able to think about Sheridan becoming 50 years of age when some people at the beginning, when the birth took place, said it will never happen, it will never work, and I was right and they were wrong. I don't often brag about this, but that was factually correct.